Okay, YouTubers, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV. Another game of interplanetary ice going on here, back on Mars, back in Gale Crater, back at Mount Sharp, and we are looking today at Sol 1520. Here's Sol 1520, mass cam, and these were taken a few weeks back now, and there's some crazy stuff in here if you know what to look for. And the image we're looking at today is this one here, okay? So you scroll down, and it's third row down, fourth one across. And we have this image here, and as with most of these images, it's been filtered and it has this kind of puke filter over it, which is this brown, horrible brown colour, and it's fairly difficult to make out some of the shapes in here because it's kind of fudged over. But you can see the city up on the hill here, up on the mountain I should say, and you've got this tower up here, you've got these pyramids and domes and all sorts of crazy structures up here, okay? Now this is miles away from the rover, but the rover has a very powerful zoom lens and they're zoomed in quite a long way, and this is the closest we've got so far to this area in recent years, okay? So without further ado, I'll show you what I found here, okay? And if you want to download this image, right click on it and save image as, rather than going to the full resolution one here, because the full resolution one is not as good. If you right click on here and save this one instead, you'll get the BR2 version of the image, okay, which is actually marginally better than the so-called full resolution ones, okay? That's a little tip for you, and you won't have all those horrible compression lines in the image like you normally get. Okay, so without further ado, here's the raw image. That's the BR2 version, and it doesn't have any of these horrible grid-like lines across it. It's fairly smooth. It's not brilliant, of course, but it's better than the usual so-called full-res image. Okay, and what we have here are the city buildings up here and pyramids and everything, like I just said. And down here we have what looks like a shipwreck. Okay, and it's fairly large. Now I don't know if you can see that in this raw image, so-called raw image. You can see this shape here, okay, and you have this thing here. Now this is very, very hard to see in the raw image, but you can just about make out here a straight line going through this structure here, a straight diagonal line. I don't know if you can see that. So without further ado, I will show you it now, and I'll start with what I did is I made my own gigapan with these images and stitched them together. I've got them here, and you've got the entire kind of edge of the mountain here with the city structures on top here. Now this is raw, it's not been enhanced or anything, but you can clearly see that these are pyramids and things like, there's a huge pyramid here, there's buildings here, there's the big dome, there's another, what could be a sphinx or something like that, some kind of huge structure there, there's a tower-like structure here, there's a dome here. Now all those can be seen in one of my previous videos, which I made only a couple of weeks back, which is called Mars City Up Close. So if you want to see all those things up on the mountain, the buildings, that's the video you want to see, okay? So you can check that out. That was published back in November, and towards the end of November, so not that long ago, okay? So you wouldn't have to trawl through loads of stuff on my channel to find that. And I'll probably put a link to that at the end of this video as well, okay? So you can just click on that link at the end of the video and it'll take you straight to it. So there we have it. This is the image, and this is the area we're looking at. So let's go back to this folder. Now what I did, I made my own gigapan, and I've taken a clip from the gigapan, but you don't need to do that because you can see all this in the one image we got here, okay? But what I did do is rotate it to the right to make it flat, like I've done here. So I've just kind of leveled it off so that we're looking at the ground in a more sort of obviously flat format, okay? And here we have it. Right, now you can't see a lot there, I appreciate that, but there's some very odd structures here which caught my eye, and I thought, that's probably a ship. Why do I think that? Well, because I've found many, many others, and there'll also be a link to my playlist, which I've got here, called Mars Boats and Shipwrecks. Now, there's 28 videos in this set here. I'm not saying you should watch all of them, but the more recent ones probably are the ones to go for, the top sort of 5 or 6 maybe. Some very, very clear ships wrecked and half buried along the bottom of Mount Sharp, which is where we are now. But most of these are further along and further back in time. In other words, I found these months and months ago, okay? Some of them years ago. Okay, so you can check that out. There'll be a link to that as well at the end of the video. I'm now going to flick through the enhancements as I did them. Now, all I do is colour correct the image like I've done here and added some contrast, okay? And suddenly you can actually see something. Hang on a minute, let's go back to the raw image. This is a clip of the image. We want to see, hang on, we want to see the raw clip, don't we? There we go. There's a raw clip. And now I'm going to go to this one. They're not in order for some reason. There it is. I've just auto white balanced it. In other words, I've corrected the colour. And immediately you can see all the blue kind of material in the foreground. And now you can start to see the shape of this thing, okay? You have the front of the ship here that goes to here. And you have the top of the ship. Now, the ship is lying on its side. In other words, it's not side onto us. It's kind of listed over towards us. And this, I think this thing at the back here, which rather odd-shaped object here, this is not a rock. And you can even see in the basic enhancement that there are interesting structures in this, okay? Uprights and what look like deck levels. Now this to me looks like part of the hull of the ship that's broken off and being chucked into this direction, okay? Whether there was a cataclysm there, we know there was. When it was is another matter. This looks like it was wrecked and smashed up, and the boat or ship has been broken up into parts. But most of it at the front is still in one piece, and this part is probably from the rear of the hull and is flipped out upside down. So this is an upside down part of the hull here, okay? It may not even be from the same ship, it may be from another one. But I'm guessing it's probably from this one, okay? So I'm just going to flick through, brighten it up again, and then I've added more and more darkness to the background just to bring out this shape here, because the problem is with these images, the way they're filtered, it's very, very hard to see what's in front and what's behind. So what you have to do when you find a very large thing, which is hundreds of feet long like this, you need to darken the background so that you can see the image, the part of the image you're concentrating on, which is this middle part. Okay, so I really went in hard with the darken brush there and darkened the background here of the mountain just to see the shape and push it forward so we can see what we're looking at, okay? So I'm going to zoom in. You can see this cross beam here going across the deck. This is the front deck here. Now, the front of this thing, it looks very odd because we have this slope here which is kind of obscuring part of the front of the ship, but the front of the ship, the bow, is partially obscured. Yeah, you can see this kind of fudgy area here, but you can also see one edge, the bottom edge here of the deck, okay? This is the top of the deck. What I mean here is the side. You can see the side of the deck here. You can see this very clear cross beam and an interesting structure here with a part to it here. And at the front, we've got this, what looks like a hole here where perhaps a crane or gun turret would have been, okay? Now, I will provide some comparative images in this video later on. When I put the clips in at the end, I'll put one or two images of shipwrecks in there just to show you what I mean, because it's hard to visualize this because this is not a ship being shown from its side, it's listed over towards us. So we're seeing the top of the deck here, okay? It's at a kind of angled away from us, okay? Well, it's leaning towards us, but the deck is leaning back, okay? Sloping that way, as you can see. And there's some interesting stuff in here, and especially this part, the hull section here. You can see these structures in here, okay? Now I've carefully gone in here and darkened parts of it and brightened some of it and added lots of contrast. I've also sharpened it a bit to try and bring out some of this detail. And it looks like it's kind of rusted through here. And this is broken off. You can see bars and metal struts and parts to it here, especially. I'm not going too close because it gets blurred. And here you can see this part which looks like a deck section, okay? So this is upside down. And you can see where it's been kind of ripped off here, okay? there we have it. What can I say? It looks like a ship. I'm not sure exactly how long it is because I don't know exactly the level of zoom of the actual camera. So I couldn't tell you exactly, but I would guess this is hundreds of feet long, possibly 200 or 300 feet, possibly more. Okay. I often think the scaling we get from Mount Sharp when you look at the NASA images is a bit out, but it's very hard to say either way because the rover is actually quite a long way off, but zoomed right in. And this is the closest it's looked at Mount Sharp, I think, so far, this particular lower section of Mount Sharp, okay? So that was about it for this. I mean, that was the fight. I did a really dark one there, just to really push it out. I just darkened it right up. And now you can see the actual outline of the ship, okay? You can see that top deck there. You can see another crossbar. These look like bulkheads. I mean, the ships on Earth tend to have the hull divided into sections so that if there's damage to one part, then you can seal it off and the ship will not sink. So this looks like a bulkhead, and another one here, okay? And you can see that structure near the front there. It looks like a collapsed crane or gun turret or something. There would have been something in that circular part here, okay? Like a little crane, perhaps. So I'm not saying this is a military vessel, but it's impossible to say. It could well have been a freighter of some sort, and this would be part of the upper deck here. This bit here, okay, but it's all kind of squashed and mangled, and a lot of it may have been torn off, you know, and you can actually see this quite clearly now. This part here, because this is closer. There's also probably a buried ship or building here in the foreground. This white thing. Now that is shown in that the previous video I was telling you about, the Mars City up close. It shows the structures up on the mountain, but also shows the structures at the bottom from further back, and you can see some other stuff there. So I recommend that. But yeah, this looks like an intelligent structure, and the thing that really did it for me when I zoomed in, I spotted that in the raw image. This thing here. This goes right from one side of the deck to the other, and you've got some interesting structures in here. It's all mangled and torn and ripped, and it may have been there for many thousands of years or even millions of years. I don't think it's that old. I think it was probably destroyed in a cataclysm in 1941 when there was a massive explosion on Mars that was seen from Earth by Clyde Tombaugh, the great astronomer, who's no longer with us. He saw it in his telescope and reported it to the American military, saying that he thought there was a nuclear explosion on the surface of Mars. Massive green explosion, so large in fact it could be seen from Earth in his telescope. So I actually think a lot of these boats and wrecked buildings and ruins actually date back to then. It's a controversial point of view, but it's a theory, and it's one of the only theories we have so far. Yeah, we're told that there hasn't been anything on Mars for millions and millions of years. Well, who says who? You know, I look at a lot of the things like bones and skulls and everything else that I found recently, and they look fairly fresh, less than 100 years old, a lot of them. So I think 1941 is probably quite a good date. I will leave a link to that video also at the end of this one, so you can check that out. That's well worth a look. Okay, so there we have it. I mean, what I'll do is I'll cut this up into sections for you, and then at the end of the video I'll break it up into 3, so you can look at each part of it individually, and I may enhance it a bit more as well, and darken it in places so you can actually see the detail. Okay, I'm just going to show you them in my version of PaintShop Pro here, because actually I realised looking back at the video then that showing them using Windows Photo Viewer is not the best way to look at these images. It tends to make them look even worse than they already are. So here's the raw image. Okay, let's zoom into that. Pretty terrible, I know, but you can kind of see the shape there when you let your eyes adjust. Okay, here's the sort of half. This is the basic enhancement, where all I've done is used a thing called fade correction. Okay, which is really cool. Fade correction, and I tend to use it on number 1 simply because otherwise it just comes out really, really blue. That's just basically a simple form of white balancing the image. Okay, and you can already see the detail in it straight away, especially here and here. Okay, like I said, clips will be in at the end of the video in a minute anyway, so you can see these properly. But I thought I'd show you in this because this has got a better resolution, this program, than Windows. So it just shows the detail better, and you've got some really interesting ripped kind of metal parts to it here. You've got that rusty part there where you can see through the hull. Okay, where it's rusted through, and you've got this bit at the back here with uprights, and you've got deck parts to it here. Okay, and my favourite bit is this part here, where you've got these cross sections or bulkhead sections here. Okay, and at the front is all kind of. I might enhance the front a bit more for you actually, because it kind of looks a bit fuzzy and out of focus. And if you look really carefully, I forgot to mention there's this square thing here, which is not on the boat or ship, but next to it, on the edge of the mountain here. Okay, I have no idea what it is. I don't know what that is at all. Got absolutely no idea. It may be part of a broken crane or some kind of industrial kind of equipment or something like that. I don't know. Could be a building. Very strange indeed, but there we go. I just thought I'd show you it in here. I'll zoom in a bit there so you can see that. I'll keep moving around. Let's just show that bit on its own. So it's some pretty good detail here, even though the images aren't brilliant. Because this is so large and we're zoomed in quite a long way, you can actually see some of the detail. So I was quite pleased about this one, because many of the boats and ships that I've found before have been miles away, and I've had to do a lot of work to actually bring out the detail, whereas this one wasn't quite so hard. It's not brilliant, but it's one of the better ones, I think. Okay, so do check out the videos at the end of the video. At this video, there will be links to the videos I mentioned, and the Clyde Tombaugh theory, of course, is one I came up with after seeing something about him on Wikipedia, and I added the two together and decided then that many of the things we're seeing are nowhere near millions of years old. Some of them may well be. The buildings we're seeing, a lot of these wrecked buildings could be millions of years old or whatever, but I do think that some of these ships and wrecks and specimens, animal specimens we're seeing, are much more recent than that, and I think 1941 is as good a number as any to start from, because NASA are not forthcoming about these things and keep us in the dark about it, so we have to fill in the gaps ourselves. Thanks for watching, everybody. Clips coming up now.